figuring out how to follow that up. I will do my best. Now I have to collect myself. Fine, on with the show. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. So, I was hoping to start this off with an actual real and serious question, but I kind of got blown out of the water. I'm wondering who I have to thank for that. But no, there's a fundamental question here. What's happening on your network? It's a simple enough question, but if it were easy to answer, we wouldn't have a conference dedicated to protocol analysis. And if it were easy to answer, 1,000 people wouldn't show up to one of Laura's webinars. And if it were easy to answer, over 500 person years, I think that's the number I last saw, wouldn't go into writing just a single protocol analyzer. So what's happening on your network? There we go, packets. I'm looking at you guys, seeing who's scanning across and looking and finding 080 or 45 and scanning down and seeing number 6 and saying, oh, we have TCP over IPv4 over Ethernet. Who analyzes protocols this way? Figured a couple of you guys would. We are here at Sharkfest. Most people, instead of looking at the raw text bytes up there, they look at Wireshark nowadays. And that's the tool we use. Years ago, back in the 90s, if you want to believe me, I'm going to tell my story. If you want to believe me, or the short film before this series, please either. We will diverge. But back in the 90s, I was working at an ISP in Kansas City. I guess they got that part right. But we had a bunch of clients that I needed to support. We're running on Solaris and Linux. But we had these big clients like AT&T and Apple and the Kansas City Chiefs and the Rolling Stones. And I had to troubleshoot the network and make sure that the network was working for these guys. And I got what you see at the top, mainly. I had TCP and Snoop and a couple of other programs like that, which are nice, but I didn't have an interactive protocol analyzer, and I really needed one. So I decided to start writing my own. And in July of 1998, I released Ethereal 0.2.0, and actually, last week, I got it up and running and got a screenshot, and then I shut that VM down. But this is what it looked like. I mean, you can still see there's a packet list in the tree and the bytes down below, but there's about 20,000 lines of code there versus close to 2 million today in the current version of Wireshark. But anyway, I did this first release, and an amazing thing happened. As soon, I think the day after, maybe 2 days later, I started getting code from people around the world, and those contributions haven't stopped. And as a result of those contributions, this is the best tool in the world for analyzing protocols. And it's thanks to, mainly to some of these guys down here, but to the development team in general, that students that are hard work. And, but the thing is, when I very first released this, my wife and I bought a house. And we bought a fixer-upper, which if you're not familiar with that term in the US, a fixer-upper means you get to repair everything in your house. And so we got occupied with doing that and focused on fixing the house, and I stopped working on the project. And by that time we had maybe 5 or 10 people contributing, and it stalled. And a few months later, I got a call from one of the developers, and if you track down my phone number, he called up and asked if the project was going to continue. And that was my first lesson. My first lesson with the project is that there are all these really talented people working on this, and they are depending on this project, and so they're depending on me to be able to support it. And so I decided at that point to support the project as best I can, and that's what I've been doing for the past 15 years. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. So, actually, this is a good place to ask this. How many people either know what open source is, or at least you know what it is, or you're involved with open source? Good. You probably know that if you want to start an open source project right now today, You write out some code and upload it to GitHub, and you're done. You know, there are all sorts of sites like GitHub and SourceForge and Google Code and probably 100 others that make it really easy to start and host an open source project. Back in '98, SourceForge didn't exist. None of these existed. And yeah, I think we predated SourceForge by a year or two. So I had to do all this myself. So I went to this brand new website called eBay. And I bought a server, if you want to call it that. It looked just like that. And I went to my friend who had a little office that he could co-locate stuff in. And so I co-located there for a while, but that fell through. And then I started consulting with ISPs around town to host the box. And we had to keep moving around, and I had to send out an email and say, well, we're going to be down today because I have to drive out to 30 miles outside town, move the box out of my friend's barn. But that was the next lesson. You have to have stable infrastructure. And like I said before, when you upload to GitHub, they have this massive, amazing infrastructure that makes it easy to host projects. But we had to do this all ourselves. I think I remember years ago sitting at a round table with Mike Kershaw and a couple of other guys, and we all started out the same way. I think, hosting this stuff ourselves, and we kind of continue that tradition today. So, as I said before, I started out, and wrote this originally for Linux and Solaris. Around that time, I was president of the Kansas City Unix user group. I liked Unix, didn't much care for Windows. But as it turns out, around the same time, there are these guys that wrote this thing called WinPCAP. And I'm looking at you, John. One of our developers found WinPCAP and ported Ethereal over to Windows, and suddenly we got really popular. And so by this time, I was hosting the server where I worked, and suddenly we didn't have any more bandwidth at work because everybody was downloading Ethereal. So, at this point I was costing my employer money, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing it. So we looked for ways to bring in revenue for the project, and we started off with putting ads on the website, and that worked okay. A lot of open source companies make money doing support. Red Hat's a good example of that. We tried offering support, got no subscriptions. So we started offering training, and that worked okay, but the thing about training was I was spending about half my time either developing course materials or doing actual training, and that was time that I was not spending supporting the developers and working on the project and writing code. So that was the next lesson, which is that there's an opportunity cost here when you do various things. You have to, you have limited resources, and everybody does. You have to apply those resources wisely. So around 2005-ish, we were really popular on Windows, and wireless was really popular at that time, and wireless kind of didn't work well all the time, and so people needed to troubleshoot wireless networks on Windows. And so if you installed Ethereal on your XP machine and selected your wireless adapter and started to capture it, what happens? Anybody? Your interface shuts down, effectively. You stop passing traffic, which is kind of the exact opposite point of what you're trying to do. Either that, or if you do get traffic, it's Windows has stripped off all the interesting wireless stuff and gives you fake Ethernet packets. So we kept getting emails from users asking how you do wireless capture on Windows, and the response was, "Go install Linux, ha 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 ha, loser." That wasn't very friendly. So by that time, the guys who had written WinPCAP were working at a company called Case Technologies. And I sent them an email and said, can we fix this Windows wireless thing, get capture going? And they said yes. And so we did a little bit of work together, and they offered me a job. This was a big deal for a couple of reasons. One, it meant moving my family halfway across the country. That was a big deal, and it meant probably having to change the name of the project because my employer at the time owned the trademark. And I had a feeling we wouldn't be able to come to an agreement on getting that, and we didn't. So there are 3 lessons here. One is that if you're delivering a product to users, you need to figure out where you're underserving them. And it seems like an obvious thing, but up until a certain point, we were telling people to go uninstall their current operating system and install another one just to solve the capture problem. That's an awful answer. The other thing is that moving and changing the name of the product was a big deal, moving across the country. I remember my daughter was very small at the time, pushing around the park in a stroller saying, gee, honey, should we do this? And we did, and it worked out for the best. And then finally, moving to Case, the company was, had a very, deep experience and understanding of open source, and so, it made a lot of sense to go there, and it actually worked out really well. So in 2008, we put on this thing called Sharkfest. And guess what happened? All these amazing people showed up. You should have been there. No, the big thing about Sharkfest for me, and it still is a big thing for me, up until that point, I knew that Wireshark had this sort of ecosystem around it, this community. But I would only deal with people, via a single email or a phone call or something, and at different times. So it wasn't quite apparent how big this thing is. But you look around, you have everybody here, the users and developers and educators and vendors. I mean, it's a big deal. And it was a real eye-opener for me and it still is. It's just a cool thing to have everybody here. At this point, I think I'm going to hop down off the stage and grab a mic. Okay. This is a really cool treat for me because I never get to, I talk about Wireshark all the time. I'm really flying around and gets me on stage. But I never get to talk about it with the other core developers. And so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to hand the mic over to these guys and let them share their stories. So.
Morning everyone, my name is Graham Loyce and I'm an Ask Wireshark addict. Like most addicts, the alarm goes off in the morning, blurry, wake up, hit the alarm, and I'm ready for that fix. But now I've got to put it off, I've got to go and get a shower, go and get breakfast, and then I fire up the tablet, look at Ask Wireshark. And being in the GMT time zone, there's obviously been a few questions posted overnight. For those lucky guys in Central European time zone, Saka and Jasper have been in there and grabbed all the juicy ones first. But there's maybe a little morsel left for me, so I pick that one up, and then the OCD kicks in, and I have to start correcting typos. I have to convert these so-called answers to comments. I have to convert comments to new questions. And that's about the rest of my day. And in between, I do fit in my day job occasionally. My employer is quite happy that I manage to do that once or twice a day. Get home, see to the dogs, see to the kids, talk to the wife for 5 minutes. Open up, Ask Wireshark again and see what those North Americans have been up to. With their funny spelling. And then occasionally, I do actually get time to look at some Wireshark source and fix the little bugs that itch me and help me in my day job. I first contributed to Wireshark in 99, maybe 2000, sent some patches in. Because for my sins, I'm one of those Windows developers, and I didn't take Gerald's advice to go and install Linux. So we needed to improve the product on Windows, and at the time we couldn't do live capture on Windows, which was very frustrating and annoying. All these Linux users have these fancy facilities, so with head scratching and a few patches backwards and forwards, we managed to get live capture going. Of course, that code's now obsolete, it's been totally tossed away, but it was there at one time. And then On my day job, I work in the SCADA industry. SCADA is a supervision control and data acquisition, basically industrial control systems. We use a lot of industrial protocols, and that's where Wireshark came in. So I maintain and curate a couple of dissectors that deal with those protocols, and I interact a fair bit on mailing lists, but I don't actually contribute much code these days, so I'm a little bit of a fake. I just turn up and talk a lot. And that's been my experience with Wireshark. Been a very pleasant community to deal with on the mailing lists, and since I started coming to Sharkfest 3 years ago, had my eyes open to the world of big networks and big data, and met a lot of wonderful people and learned a lot of things. So thank you very much for all turning up and sharing all your experiences with us while we're here.
Hi, I'm Jeff Morris, another one of the core developers. I've been working with, started with Ethereal in 2001. I think I come from a slightly different background. I've worked for a product company. We used to make an SS7 stack for signaling and telephone networks. And right around 2001, they were coming up with this new thing called SIGTRAN, which was basically SS7 over IP. I go watch the developers as they were building it. They fired up this thing called Ethereal. Wow, that was cool. I mean, the old SS7 snippers were, you sort of had bytes on the left and then a decode on the right, and it was all very long and ugly and DOS-based. And one of the things is the developers at the time, Ethereal, understood up through SCTP, which was basically Ethernet IP SCTP, and then we had a protocol called M2PA that we were developing, and didn't do it. And it was sort of frustrating because they had all this fancy stuff, and then they had to go back and start decoding hex bytes. Then something rather unfortunate happened. I was working in customer support, and I got shipped to Mexico City, and I was held political hostage by a customer of ours, babysitting an HLR, working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was really, really bored. And so I downloaded the Ethereal source code, and happened to be running Linux on my laptop, so it was easy enough. I got it compiled and running, and I got the developers to send me a capture file of this M2PA stuff, and 2 nights later, I had a dissector. Wow, that was easy. And I got back and I emailed it in, and somebody just checked it in. I was like, wow, that was easy. And then, this M2PA, above that was a protocol called MTP3, and there's different variants. There's ITU version that somebody had already written a dissector for. And I just sort of ported that, and then we could also work on the ANSI version, which is what we use here in the US, and just sort of kept going. Then after that, I pretty much just hung around and started fixing bugs, and I've been a core contributor since 2006, I guess. I guess this is my 3rd Sharkfest, so I just sort of, I don't know. It's been a lot of fun, and we use it. My entire company uses it. All the developers, all the testers, and it's part of daily life. And I don't know. That's about all I really had to say, I guess.
Hello, I'm Martin Matheson. I'm a developer. I've mostly worked in telecoms protocol. For the last 12 years, really, I've tried to make Wireshark part of every job I do. Always trying to be the local expert in it. And that's been really good because you get to learn about all the things going on in your company. You know what's going on, let's put it that way. So I've written a lot of internal Wireshark code, a lot of quick and dirty stuff that I was too ashamed to send it to anyone. some stuff that's only been locally important in private sectors, but also a lot of public code. And it's really been great for me to send that code in and to have some of these guys fix it for me, or to send me a capture and say, we read the spec differently, don't tell anybody I gave you this capture, but take a look at this. Really useful. But the role within, I've always tried to be the Wireshark guy, and that role's changed as more and more people use it. So to begin with, maybe no one had heard of it, or they hadn't used it, and I would have to use it, or I would have to be the person to do it. And then, later on, they would want me to do training, and I'll give the training. I'd have to go around and set up everyone's machine, and then I'd probably have to look at the logs for them. Gradually, more and more people could do it themselves. And now, when I first came to Sharkfest, obviously I had an interest in Wireshark, and every time I heard the word, my ears would pick up and I would look around. When I came here, it was like sensory overload. It's just exhausting. But now I hear Wireshark said it every day. I walk past screens with Wireshark on it, and I ignore it. It's everywhere. And in fact, I just started a new job, and I deliberately didn't get involved with the way they were using Wireshark for the first few weeks. And on the last day of the first year, I finally caved in and I said, can you give me this private cassette you have in one of your capture files and have a look at it? We've got some big changes to make when I go back, but I won't get involved. No, it's been great, really good for my career, and I recommend anyone try to become the Wireshark guy wherever they work.
Hi everybody, my name is Martin Kaiser. I've only been involved with Wireshark lately. But the reason why I got into Wireshark is really very old. So I'm from Europe, and we have this thing called European Union, and ages ago they were saying, we set up a law, if you want to sell a TV set in Europe, it has to include a PCMCIA slot. You might remember on your old laptops you had these PCMCIA modem cards and everything, and that still exists in TVs. And there were some other people saying, okay, if we have that card and the TV, we need a communication protocol. And they defined a 7-layer communication protocol, packet-based, for the PC card to talk to the TV. And that wasn't really used very much. Every TV manufacturer had to put that in. Nobody really had much use for it. And some years ago, some companies defined a pay TV solution based on that. So, and that whole thing, the whole system started getting used. Also by my employer at the time, Panasonic. So we started using that, and problems showed up, obviously, and I was thinking everybody has a nice tool to analyze network traffic, packet-based traffic, just the TV people don't. Somebody built me a hardware that gave me the equivalent of Gerald's first slide, so I had a text file with some bytes. And I thought I could give a try to see if I can use Wireshark for analyzing that. It's certainly not what the original intention was, but I'll see how far I can get. And it turned out that was surprisingly easy. So within a couple of days of work, I really had something where I can see the first packets. And it turned out that this was really useful. And other people kept asking me for it in the company and kept testing. And I thought, well, I could as well submit this to the official Wireshark distribution. I don't think too many people are interested in it, but why not? And it got some rounds of improvements, and finally it was committed. And other people started improving it. That was really great. And as I continued working on it, I saw that although this has not much to do with the rest of Wireshark, there was still a lot of code that I could be using, that I could benefit from. And yeah, well, the rest is pretty much the same as for others. I continued to hang around and fix bugs, and finally was invited to the core team. And yeah, probably one last thing to say. A while ago I was giving a workshop about Wireshark and telling a similar story, like everyone can contribute. That was a great experience for me to see. And everybody can make a difference. And couple of weeks after the workshop, there was a bug report from somebody saying, well, I thought about that, and here's my first dissector, have a look at it. That was great. Thanks.
Hi there, my name is Ronnie Solberg. I've been contributing to Wireshark since, I think, either late 2000 or early 2001. In those days, I was working for a very large storage vendor, and part of my job was to analyze NFS traffic and SIPS traffic and other things. But I don't know if you were around in those days, because I was from a very large company, so we could pretty much buy any kind of hardware or software we wanted. But when you went out to the market and looked at the big commercial ones, they pretty much all of them worked like, to decode something, you look at fixed offsets into an Ethernet frame. So you look at offset 58, that might be the NFS header where it starts. But they were not engineering tools, they were IT tools. They couldn't even keep any state in session. So for example, if you look at NFS, you can decode the NFS request packet just fine because the RPC header would say, this is NFS, blah, blah, blah. But then when you come to the reply, there's nothing in the reply that says, this is an NFS packet. So if you looked at the, I don't know, they were so bad in those days. So when you looked at the replies, you could see NFS request and then just a generic ONC RPC reply. And you had to do all that matching manually. This is when I adjust, well, it gets old really, really quick to sit and do that with pen and paper and you have 10 million packets in your capture. This was when I discovered Wireshark. It's like, oh great, open source. You could just download the source. It could do a bunch of what I needed, but the best thing was that I don't have to go and bug the vendor over and over and over to, can you please add these features? They are vital to us. We buy thousands and thousands of licenses. I didn't have to do that anymore. I just downloaded the source. I implemented the feature I wanted. Well done. Problem solved. Open source. Yay.
So, good. Thanks, guys. That was really cool. So I was talking about Sharkfest. In 2010, we had Sharkfest, and these people showed up from this company called Riverbed. And okay, a few months later, they bought Case. Now, as it turns out, Case. By that time, we developed a lot of products that were, really useful for analyzing networks and, going through a bunch of capture data and passing that on to Wireshark, and it worked really well. And Riverbed had a product line that kind of extended that and took it even further, and we really gelled and worked well together. But the thing about, Riverbed buying Case was, okay, suddenly you have this large corporation taking over the sponsorship and assets of an open source project. And if you remember about that time, there were examples of big companies doing that with other open source projects with the Sun acquisition, and things not going very well at all. In fact, going very badly enough to make the news. And so there's a lot of concern, when suddenly this big company wants to buy Wireshark, and what's going to happen. And I kept getting emails, accusing me of, coming out with Wireshark Pro and charging money for it, and it's like. But it's a valid concern. And when Riverbed bought Case, our CEO Gary Canelli, publicly said that Riverbed was committed to supporting Wireshark. And Paul Brady, the head of the business unit that I'm a part of, said the same thing. And our CEO at that time, Steve McMahon, said the same thing. And I wrote a blog post saying, from my perspective, from the inside, this is a great thing. And still there was kind of some pushback, and I guess, the lesson here is that in the sort of situation you have to prove yourself and actually speak louder than words, and I think Verbo's done a great job with that. My boss, Glenn, a few months ago called me up and said, hey, we have some servers, you need them? Yes. So, I'm proud to say that Wireshark is doing really well. I don't have to scrounge for equipment anymore, which is a useful thing. It lets me concentrate on other things, supporting the project. I'm not going to read off everything here, but the big thing everybody's amazed at is that we get about 500,000 downloads a month, usually more. But the big thing that I'm really happy about is that networks aren't black boxes. You can look under the hood, you can see the packets, you can see what's going on. Thanks not only to Wireshark, but to projects like Kismet and Nmap and WinPCAP and USB PCAP and a lot of these other projects. This is a really important thing, for the health of the internet and networks in general, because the more, you can see by, I don't have to sell this to you guys here at Sharkfest, but the more you know about networks, the healthier everything's going to be. And last year Cliff Stoll was up here on stage giving a keynote, much better than I can. But in his closing comments, he talked about how the cloud is, not this ethereal thing up in the sky, but it's made of actual hardware, run by actual people, and it's important to remember that. And I don't have to tell you guys that because you guys are the people doing that work. But I'm really happy about this fact that you can peer inside the network really easily just by downloading an application. Where are we on time? Okay, good. I say we're doing well, but we still have some things that we need to fix. One of the big things about Ethereal and Wireshark was that you could run it everywhere. And that's still mostly the case, but when I bring it up on my Mac, it doesn't look so good, and you have to do extra stuff to install it. And Laura keeps bugging me about running it on her iPad, and I don't know how that's going to work. And the thing is, the cloud's a great and wonderful thing, but that means all of my packets are somewhere else. They're not, within a network that I have control over. And the IEEE keeps coming out with faster Ethernet, which is great, but that just means that I have 1 trillion packets to look at instead of 100. And finally, one of the great things and useful things about Wireshark has been that for every bit and byte in a packet, you get a lot of context, you get a lot of meaning. And we can do more in that regard. We can tell you, say, what process it came from. I'd like to see that. And I'd even like to see what API call within the application generated that packet. I want a stack trace for every packet, because that won't take up any space or CPU resources. But there's still work to do, and it's exciting work, and I'm looking forward to working on it. And I'm excited to see what arises from this. There's a bonus lesson here, and it involves this picture. I took this picture last summer. I do road biking. Does anybody here ride a bicycle at all? Okay. I see Dave. No, but I ride around the Central Valley in California, and in the summer it's really hot and it's really dry, and they have things called heat advisories that the Weather Service tells you to stay inside, and I ignore those. And so I was riding out on some country road, and I ran across this guy, and I was out melting and killing myself, and he was resting in the shade. Now, if you take these two facts and consider them together, you can reasonably conclude that I'm dumber than livestock. Wireshark is a great and wonderful thing, and it's not because of me, it's because of you. It's because of the developers, and because of the users, and the educators, and the vendors. And it's an exciting thing to be a part of, and I can't thank you enough. So, thank you.
where the